bar and grill. These law enforcement officers, in the face of danger, responded swiftly, selflessly, and with great bravery. Bravery that they continue to demonstrate today as they search tirelessly for a person of interest in connection with last night's events. On behalf of all Maine people, I express my deep gratitude for your response and for your continued service. I also do so for Maine's hospitals and other medical emergency responders. I'm profoundly saddened to stand before you today to report that 18 people lost their lives and 13 people injured in last night's attacks. In memory of those we lost and in honor of those who were injured, President Biden and I have ordered all U.S. flags and state of Maine flags to be lowered to half-staff immediately for the next 5 days. Maine State Police have issued a shelter-in-place order for Lewiston, Lisbon, and Bowdoin as the manhunt for that person of interest, Robert Card of Bowdoin, continues. I will let law enforcement speak to the ongoing manhunt and to their investigation, but Mr. Card is considered armed and dangerous, and police advise that Maine people should not approach him under any circumstances. I continue to strongly urge Maine people to follow the direction of state and local law enforcement amid this ever-changing situation. Please, if you see anything suspicious, please call 911. There are still many things we don't yet know about these attacks, but the full weight of my administration is behind law enforcement's efforts to capture the person of interest, Robert Card, to hold whoever is responsible for this atrocity accountable under the full force of state and federal law, and to seek full justice for the victims and their families. We cannot and we will not rest in this endeavor. My administration is coordinating closely with local, regional, and federal officials to respond to this shooting. I have spoken twice with President Biden. I've spoken with Vice President Harris, Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas, and Secretary of Health and Human Services Becerra, all of whom have called me last night to express the Biden administration's full and unwavering support and to offer any and all help that we, the people of Maine, might require. The governors of our neighboring New England states and of other states have contacted me to offer aid, and I am sincerely grateful for their friendship and support. We've been in touch with every member of the Maine congressional delegation, all of whom have offered their full support, for which I am also grateful. I also spoke with Mayor Carl Chalene and Auburn Mayor Jason Lebec last night to reiterate that we are standing by them and that we are ready to provide any help people in these communities need and to deploy all available state resources, including grief counselors and other mental health services. We need to help our communities heal. If you or a person you love needs someone to talk to during this difficult time, please call or text 988 for free and confidential counseling. 988. Look, Lewiston is a special place. It's a close-knit community with a long history of hard work, of persistence, of faith, of opening its big heart to people everywhere. Lewiston is where I worked for years. It's where I met and married my husband and where our girls went to school. I love this place just as I love the whole state with my entire heart. I'm so deeply saddened, as is every one of the 1.3 million people of this beautiful state. This city did not deserve this terrible assault on its citizens, on its peace of mind, on its sense of security. No city does, no state, no people. No words can truly or fully measure the grief of many people today. Our small state of just 1.3 million people has long been known as one of the safest states in the nation. This attack strikes at the very heart of who we are and the values we hold dear for this precious place we call home. All Maine people are sharing the sorrow of the families who lost loved ones last night. Loved ones, normal people who were killed or injured while unwinding from a day of work or while spending time with their family and friends, socializing. So on behalf of the 1.3 million people of the whole state of Maine, I hold these families and this city in my heart today. I know that the people of Lewiston are enduring immeasurable pain. I wish I could take that pain off your hearts, off your shoulders, but I promise you this, we will all help you carry that grief. I ask Maine people to join me in offering our comfort to the families and friends who have lost someone, and in offering our prayers for swift recovery for those who are healing in Maine's hospitals today. This is a dark day for Maine. I know it's hard for us to think about healing when our hearts are broken. But I want every person in Maine to know that we will heal together. We are strong. We are resilient. We are a very caring people. In the days and weeks ahead, we will need to lean on those qualities more than ever before. As we move forward, struggling as we may, let us wrap our arms around one another, offer comfort and solace and love. I know the Maine State Police will continue to release information to the public as we confirm it, and information about any steps that the public might take to support the people of Lewiston at this time. May God bless the people of Lewiston and bless the memories of those we've lost. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Sasha.
Thank you very much, Governor. We certainly appreciate your support. The City of Lewiston does, the state of Maine, and certainly our first responders. We feel that love every day, and thank you very much for that. I would also say that we want to say thank you to a really large number of other elected officials across our state, whether that's the federal delegation, local elected officials, and many others that are part of organizations or law enforcement agencies that truly wanted to join us today at this particular press event and wanted to speak on behalf of their communities. And as the governor had mentioned, and everybody else will reiterate, our reality for today is that this suspect is still at large. And we want to provide community support for the victims, for the families, in the communities across the state. But we also have an incredibly strong laser-like focus on bringing this suspect into custody and ultimately to justice. So because of that mission for this particular event and today's activities, we're keeping the list of speakers and the agenda pretty tight. And that will include next up at the podium would be Chief Dave St. Pierre for the city of Lewiston. And some other members of his command staff are present. What I will say to the city of Lewiston, and you know this because you feel it every day, but you're lucky to have a chief like Chief St. Pierre and his entire law enforcement agency. From every level, those officers put their heart and their soul on the line on behalf of their community last night and into today. And they're doing it for the right reasons. They do it because they care. So the city of Lewiston and truly our co-responder family across the state of Maine is lucky to have Dave and his team in the mix with us. And we're also going to hear from Colonel William Ross from the Maine State Police. And Bill will highlight some of the timeline things that you're probably concerned about and certainly interested in from a story perspective. So the Colonel will come up and speak to that. And we'll also have Jody Cohen. And Jody is the special agent in charge for the FBI out of the Boston field office. And Jody will highlight some of those federal partnerships and some of the things that our federal partners are bringing to the table, bringing to bear to help us with this investigation. We also have a bunch of people here. Once you start naming people, you're going to have a problem because you're going to forget somebody or screw something up. But I would also tell you that a couple of our other federal partners are here. Kevin Neal, who's the U.S. Marshal for the District of Maine. We also have James Ferguson, and Jim is the special agent in charge from the ATF for the Boston Field Division. They are heavily invested with staff along with the FBI, and we can't thank them enough for all that they're doing on behalf of our state. I would also tell you that we are going to close with a brief Q&A, and we're going to try to get some of those questions out there. We appreciate your time, your patience, your professionalism, your partnership in getting this information out. I would think that those questions are going to be brief, because again, we do have a suspect at large, and while you can help us with that, we also need to get back to our team to push forward on that. So with that in mind, I will be back up to the podium to kind of steer that a little bit. But for starters, I would like Chief St. Pierre to join.
Thank you, Director Sawchuk, and welcome media partners, and thank you, Governor Mills, for those kind words. I'm going to keep this short. What I would like the very most is to express our deepest sympathies to the families and friends of the victims of this heinous crime. This is truly a tragedy that goes beyond comprehension. I'm confident in our community, that our community has and will continue to come together throughout this endeavor to bring this to a successful conclusion. Although difficult, I do ask the public to continue to be mindful of their own personal safety and also that they be patient with the process as much as possible. There is extensive work and attention to detail that goes into such a large-scale investigation. I'm confident in the expertise and professionalism of our investigators and all law enforcement officials that are currently involved. This is an all-hands-on-deck approach. We have a great deal of collaboration and resources that have been made available to us. There are far too many to name individually, but I think Director Sawchuk named quite a few appropriately. There are far too many, as I stated, but they are all appreciated more than you know. I want to thank all of our brave men and women of the Lewiston Police Department, Fire Department staff, medical personnel, first responders of any kind that came from far and wide and have come together and continue to work tirelessly in bringing this situation to an end. We hope to locate and hold the person accountable. I think you'll hear next from the State Police, who is taking the lead in this investigation. Although that we are working hand in hand with them, I think Colonel Ross will be able to fill you in on a little bit more.
Thank you, Chief. First and foremost, this is an ongoing homicide investigation and search for the person that is responsible for it. We're in the early stages of this investigation, and I just want to let you know we will have updates. We'll be putting some type of a schedule out later on. But again, early stages of a homicide investigation, we want to be careful that we're doing things correctly. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to give you a bit of a timeline here to kind of fill in some of the blanks and give you some of the facts as we know them right now. A lot of this information will then be transferred to the Attorney General's office, as they will be the lead prosecutor, again, in any homicide investigation. Last night, October 25th at approximately 6:56 p.m., the Auburn Communications Center received a 911 call of a male shooting in Just in Time, or the Spare Time Recreation Center in the town of Lewiston, located at 24 Mollison Way in Lewiston. Shortly after that, at about 7:08 p.m., the Communications Center received multiple 911 calls about an active shooter inside of a Smenji's Billiards at 553 Lincoln Street in the town of Lewiston. A large law enforcement response from multiple surrounding agencies assisted the Lewiston Police Department in trying to identify who this individual was and what was happening. As you can imagine, this was a very fast-paced, fast-moving, very fluid scene, very dangerous scene that these guys and girls were going into. 18 people are now deceased at this time. The victims at the just-in-time establishment, 7 people are deceased there, 1 female and 6 males, all from an apparent gunshot wound. Victims at the Schmegli's Billiards, 8 are deceased. 7 males inside the establishment, 1 male outside of the establishment. Again, also apparent gunshot wounds. Multiple people were transferred to area hospitals, Central Maine Medical Center, St. Mary's, and Maine Medical Center. 3 people that were transferred to those hospitals are deceased, for a total of 18 people deceased at this time. The investigation into the person responsible for this identified a vehicle located at the Projetska boat landing in Lisbon. That person, through the registration of that vehicle, was identified, as been stated earlier, as a Robert Card, born in 1983. Several of the deceased have been identified, and their families, next of kin, have been notified. Approximately 8 people at this point have been identified. 10 people, 10 of these victims, still need to be identified at this time. Currently, there is an arrest warrant for 8 counts of murder for Mr. Card. And the reason it's 8 counts because 10 people have not yet been identified. As those people are identified, the counts would probably go to the total of 18. He should be considered armed and dangerous. Based on our investigation, we believe this is someone that should not be approached. This is someone that should be, if you come into any contact with this individual or someone that you think looks like this individual, you were to call 911, and I'll provide some tip line numbers at the conclusion of my briefing. Lewiston Police Department, federal, state, and other local municipalities are involved in a coordinated search at this moment for this individual. So there's the ongoing investigation, and there's a search to apprehend this person.
Starts right now. And welcome to The Factor Uncensored. We start off with a very important problem that seems to get worse throughout the years: bullying.
You understand that. I'm going to give out 2 numbers that go to a tip line. 911 is also appropriate for this, but if anyone can call these 2 numbers, this would go to the State Police tip line. Area code 207-213-9526, 207-509-9002. And we'll be sending something out later that has that information in it if you weren't able to grab that now. Again, this is a very fluid situation. We have a lot of resources, as Chief St. Pierre had mentioned earlier, that are on the ground in a coordinated effort to apprehend this individual. We've notified the Department of Education, and they have determined what they're going to do with the schools. A lot of schools, area schools, were shut down today based on our conversation with them. Again, as more information comes in, we'll be providing it to you. Thank you for your time. This is a very difficult time for, I think, the community of Lewiston, difficult time for, obviously, the victims' families. It's a tough time for law enforcement. It was a rough night last night, but we're committed to bringing whoever's responsible this to justice. And again, we are currently looking for Mr. Card right now, someone that we'd like to apprehend. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. And FBI Special Agent in Charge, Cohen, if you could join me, please.
Thank you. My name is Jody Cohen. I'm the Special Agent in charge of FBI Boston Division, which covers the state of Maine. Our hearts go out to everyone who is impacted as a result of this senseless violence. The FBI is working hand in hand with our law enforcement partners. Our evidence response team is here processing the very extensive scenes. We are providing investigative and tactical support, as well as our victim specialists are working with those affected by this tragedy. As this very active investigations continues to unfold, we're asking the public to stay vigilant and come forward with any information that you might have that you feel is helpful to our investigators. My pledge is that the FBI will carry out this investigative case with rigor. We will work day and night alongside our law enforcement partners to get the answers to the questions this community deserves. We thank the public for your continued cooperation and patience as we continue to work this very active investigation. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I would say that the reality here from a resource standpoint is that when we've asked for anything, the answer has been yes, period. Tactical teams, evidence response teams, full-blown investigative units, detective units that have come from multiple states, whether it's the commissioners from Vermont and New Hampshire reaching out to me directly, Massachusetts saying, what do you need, Mike? What can we do for the state of Maine? So we are now prepared to try to take a few questions and keep in mind, again, that we may not be able to answer as in-depth as you would like, and we don't plan on taking a great deal of questions. I think follow-up press events will allow for that. Sir?
So no one has really talked about the weapon that was used here, the AR style, so hope someone can talk about that. But the other thing here is there are reports that this individual had mental health issues, that he made threats to shoot up the National Guard. So clearly there were some signs here that he was on someone's radar. The question becomes, why was he in possession of this weapon? And certainly, why wasn't he stopped sooner?
Yeah, I think those are all valid questions, and certainly questions that we are looking into now, but not questions that we can answer today. Considering that this occurred last night, there's still an active search for the suspect in question, so I can appreciate those questions, but not something we're going to be able to answer right now.
Is it something that you're investigating and looking into?
It is certainly one of those things that we want to follow up on, all aspects of that. Go ahead, right here. Yes.
Can you give us a sense of the ages of who has died, how many are under 18 and how many are over 18?
I'm not sure we have that information with us today. We wanted to break it down by gender because that's something we had readily available. We did not break this down into age ranges at all.
Sir, what can you tell us? What can you tell us about the background of the suspect in this case, or I should say the person of interest, because I noticed the language is very clear. You're saying person of interest, not suspect. So why use that terminology, and what can you tell us about his background?
Yeah, I think we used person of interest last night for half of the room that was here for that press event. As the Colonel had mentioned, there is now arrest warrants for murder for this particular individual, Mr. Card. So he is viewed as a suspect, and there is a full court press by all of our partners to bring him into custody. What was the second piece of that question?
What can you tell us about his background? Someone had asked a second ago about the idea that he had voiced concerns about his own mental health, right? Had been committed, according to language in the police bulletin, to a mental health facility for weeks. How could someone that fits that profile still be in possession of semi-automatic weapons?
Well, I do think that the statutes around firearms and the possession of those are pretty complex. I know that we will be reviewing that information as we move forward, but that's not an answer that we're prepared to give today, because that leads to motive. You're talking about behavioral health issues and how that impacts this situation. I would expect you'll hear back from us on that in the future. Right here, sir.
Yeah, I've got a question about, we've seen helicopters as far north as Monmouth. Can you tell us anything about what's leading you that far north of the scene where you come from?
Yeah, sure. So we have law enforcement assets that are deployed over a number of communities doing follow-ups on a number of different things. So as you can imagine, there's a great deal of search warrants that we're following up on. We do have partners, that helicopters from the New Hampshire State Police. That copter was here last night to assist us as well. So whether we have tactical elements out or we're searching an area, some of those air assets would be very, very valuable for us. So that's what they're doing.
That's leading you there?
We're not going to speak to what brings us to a specific community one way or the other. Yes, ma'am. Right here.
Identifying the unidentified victims what are people encouraged to do? Is there DNA being, tested from family members who may have missing loved ones? Like, what's that approach right now?
Yeah, so we did have a family a reunification center open last night. We do have behavioral health liaisons that are fully engaged to work with families and work with loved ones and work with victims, for that matter, that may be in the hospital and seeking treatment. So those things are actively occurring. We are dealing with each one of those situations separately. So do we need DNA on that? Are we just waiting to find a loved one, some kind of family member that we can make a notification? I think that varies across the board. I'm going to take two more questions. I'm going to take two more. Right here?
Yes, was there some sort of triggering event? Is that something that you're investigating?
I think we're always concerned around motive. That you say triggering event, that's a motive for us. Again, that's not something we're prepared to discuss today, but I do appreciate the question. It's clearly something that's important. One additional follow-up from you.
Can you help us understand why these locations, why this bar, why this bowling alley? Was he looking for someone? Was he looking for something?
I think that does speak to motive, so I appreciate the follow-up, but not something we're going to be prepared to answer today. I'm going to have one more question right here, sir. Right here.
Can you say, is cards, first off, to clarify, were the arrest warrants issued today? And can you say if Card is still in the state or he's still alive?
Well, we're actively searching for him. If I knew the answers to those questions, and this would be a different press conference, I would assume. So we don't know his location, and I'll leave it at that. And we are working with the Attorney General's office reference to those murder homicides. So with that in mind, we're done taking questions for now. So we are going to actually take off at this point. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody.
Have there been any credible sightings? I mean, we've not really gotten many answers.
Thank you.
All right, so that is the end of that news conference. As you are taking a look over in Lisbon, Maine right now, one of the many communities where search efforts are underway for now considered a suspect here. Want to go over the latest here that we learned on the deadly mass shooting there in Maine as we receive that update from Maine State Police and the governor saying that at least 18 people are now confirmed dead, 13 others wounded after a gunman opened fire inside of several businesses in Lewiston, Maine last night. State Police originally calling 40-year-old Robert Card a person of interest, but now saying that he will be charged with murder. They say as of now he will be charged with 8 counts of murder, but once apprehended, more of the victims are identified there, more charges will come as a result. Residents in multiple communities, including this one in Lisbon, ordered to shelter in place, staying inside their homes and keeping their doors locked as that manhunt does continue for Card. A police bulletin obtained by the Associated Press and by Fox News identified Robert Card as a firearms instructor believed to be in the Army Reserve and assigned to a training facility in Saco, Maine. At this point, a lot left to figure out here, still quite a few questions. We're going to go to our first 2-minute commercial break, but on the other side, an expert will join us to help break it all down. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox 1112 over on the East Coast and 812 on the West Coast. We do continue to follow our top story right now, this deadly mass shooting in Maine and the manhunt underway for the man who was initially called a person of interest, but now essentially we're told will be charged with at least 8 counts of murder. We did get that update before the break from the Maine State Police saying that at least 18 people are now confirmed dead, 13 others wounded after the gunman opened fire inside of several businesses there in Lewiston, Maine. State Police originally calling 40-year-old Robert Card a person of interest, now saying that he will be charged with at least 8 counts of murder until more of the victims can be identified and then more charges are likely. However, it is important to note that he is not in custody as of this hour. I want to bring in Bobby Chacon, a retired FBI agent, joining us here to help break down the latest information from investigators. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
First off, we had that news conference here that was about 20 or so minutes in length. I just want to get your overall takeaways from that news conference. What stood out to you?
Well, I think what stood out to me and probably some other people is that it was short, it was brief, there was a lack of information coming, and I think that's because we still have a suspect at large. I think people have to understand that, you know, this person could be, I mean, I watched the press conference on my phone. He could be watching law enforcement's moves. You know, we probably think he has a police scanner. He could be listening to the radio. So the least amount of information we can provide to him, because he's part of the general public still, the better it is for our chances of apprehending him quickly before he hurts anybody else. So I think that it was short on details, but I think once he's in custody, you're going to have a full-blown press conference where you're going to get much, much more information.
Are there any questions that you were maybe hoping would be answered that weren't answered but wouldn't necessarily mess up the investigation in any way? Anything that sticks out to you that you were hoping police might provide some feedback or information on?
Well, I mean, look, we all want to know similar things. I think that his background, mainly what happened last summer when he was confined to a mental health facility because he was having issues, these threats that he made to shoot up his Army Reserve base and other threats like that. You know, I know we'll get those answers, but those are the things that I know what's happening behind the scenes. I've been part of these manhunts. I was down in North Carolina looking for Eric Robert Rudolph, the Centennial bomber, for months at a time. And so I've been part of these big, large-scale, multi-agency efforts, and I know there's a lot of going on behind the scenes. But for me personally now, sitting now as a member of the public, you know, you hear these stories that he made these threats, and he was confined to a mental health facility, and that kind of jumps off the page at someone and says, well, how, if those things happen, how does he still have, you know, access to these weapons? And you know, and I know the laws don't exist for, this is not a law enforcement issue, by the way. This is a social service or mental health industry issue, and so we need to start looking at how we deal with people like this. I mean, we should have looked at this long ago, but that's the questions I want to know. His background, who knew he had these problems in his life, be it his superiors at the Army, be it his family, his friends, his co-workers, all of that stuff, that this was clearly someone who wasn't under the radar. You know, you have people that pull these shootings off that did seemingly operate under the radar, but this person doesn't. It seems like he was out there making threats. People in his life knew he was unstable, and yet he clearly had access to things that could wreak, you know, havoc and violence and death. And so that's a concern. That's one of the things I want to know.
And I want to go back in time a little bit here. When you first heard the information starting to come out here, we heard last night just kind of bits and pieces before a news conference was held. What were you thinking at that point as things started to come in and we started to learn a little bit more?
Well, the first thing was that there were 2 separate locations kind of across town from each other in Lewiston. Now, you remember like the Pulse nightclub, or a lot of these incidents are single location incidents. Even as deadly as the one in Vegas was, the guy shooting out of the MGM hotel, it was a single venue and a single location. Once I heard there were 2 locations and he was on the move killing people in 2 locations, it's the worst case scenario, because I figured there would be a 3rd location possibly a fourth location. He's on the move. He's retaining his ability to kill people at different locations. And so I was really, really concerned with the community at large there. I thought maybe there would be more shootings in more locations, because he didn't pick just one location and focus on it. He actually did a bunch of killings, did a bunch more killings. And my concern was that there were going to be third, fourth, fifth locations where, multiple people were killed. Luckily, that did not happen. Well, it hasn't happened yet.
I know these manhunts are difficult. There's a lot of agencies involved. Obviously, you've been involved in manhunts before. Can you kind of walk me through how this process works now? Because we know that folks not just in that area, but in other neighboring cities and towns have been told to stay in their homes, lock their doors, and essentially just stay safe right now, as, this guy could be, quote unquote, anywhere.
Yeah, well, what we do is we all come together and we actually train and practice for these kind of things. And there's software that's put on our computers that we gather, and everybody signs on. Everybody's part of the team. It's really a management of resources type of challenge. And so you get together and you dispatch people to do this. Someone's looking at his social media all night. Someone's knocking on doors of his friends and family. Someone's talking to his Army superiors. This happened all night, probably. And so different teams are doing different things. So now it's a matter of managing that information as it comes back into the command post that they probably established there in Maine. The FBI office in Boston has a sub-office in Portland, Maine, and it has offices, adjacent field offices in other states that are probably all coordinating. We're talking to ATF. Everybody on the ground there in Maine is coordinating. It's very, very important to coordinate all this effort. And so that's what's happening. A lot of information is now coming back in where he could be. They're probably searching his internet history. Did he search anything like this? This seems to be a planned attack. So he probably was either online or a search of his home. The FBI has evidence response teams who are our CSI. We don't really call them CSI. We call them ERT. Our evidence response team is probably combing through his house in case he stayed off the internet, if he wrote things down, if there's slips of paper. It's a very meticulous process, both online and at his home. But they're trying to look at where he might be right now, because there's only one concern right now, is getting him into custody before he harms anybody else. And so every effort is directed towards that goal, towards getting him. So yes, people are looking back at his past right now, but the main goal, the main objective, and where almost all the resources are being dedicated right now, is to getting him in custody.
Why refer to him as a person of interest? We've heard that from authorities. We now know that he is going to be charged with at least 8 counts of murder once he is taken into custody. But he's been referred to by law enforcement up to this point as a person of interest rather than a suspect. Why is that?
There are legal ramifications for the use of different, labels on people. The FBI, unfortunately knows that better than anyone after the Richard Jewell debacle at the Olympics in Atlanta, when a person was named as a suspect and his life was ruined, basically, and he was an innocent man. And so, we have to be very careful in the early hours of these things. Different agencies have different levels of comfort as to when you cross that threshold from a person of interest to a suspect. It's not necessarily a legal definition, but things do change when you start talking like that. It's a similar thing to when you're doing a crash site and you're calling it a rescue operation. When do you start calling it a recovery operation, right? So and you leave the rescue part behind. So yeah, it's really a level of comfort thing about the people involved at that agency and their public information people about when you transfer it. Now this morning, there's a arrest warrant now on. He's charged in an arrest warrant. So they went before a judge or a magistrate. They laid out the initial evidence. The magistrate said, yes, you have probable cause that this guy is the one who did it. So now all bets are off. Now you can call him a suspect. You have an arrest warrant in hand, and you're searching for a suspect.
Yeah, and all of this information, like I said, is kind of coming in. We know that there's been a certain flow of information from these agencies there. What do you think about the overall flow of information coming in from law enforcement to members of the public, members of the media? Because they were pretty active on social media, letting people know, we do have an active shooter situation. They were doing that fairly quickly. So what are your thoughts overall on the way that this was handled as far as the flow of information?
Well, I think it was good. I think this is a challenging endeavor for any agency when you're involved in this thing. And my personal approach when I was working these cases was always there's two categories of information that are released to the public. That is information that actually aids the public in keeping itself safe. So in other words, he's been spotted in this place or he's been spotted in that place. So the people in those places can shelter in place. So that's one. The other one does the release of that information strategically aid the investigation. So if we can release something strategically that makes him go in one direction rather than the other, that helps the investigation. If it doesn't fall into one of those two categories, the information, then I was never a fan of releasing it until the person's in custody and caught. And then you're working with the prosecutor's office. Then you turn to the prosecutor and say, now we're looking at a trial. We want to preserve everything as much as we can to get a conviction. And so the prosecutor at that point takes over and says, I don't want this released. You can release that because now you're talking about a jury pool and you're talking about legal considerations in a courtroom. But right now you're looking at public safety. You have to keep the public safe. So you release any information that's going to definitively keep the public safe, either in their actions or otherwise. So you tell people, the latest on where he was spotted or suspicious activity, a car was stolen or a garage was broken into, all of those things. And by the way, the people in those communities should shelter in place. And if they look out their window and notice something amiss in their backyard, something's been knocked over, even if it looks innocuous to you, report it to the police, because somebody running, he's on the run. If he's not in a car, he's traversing things and he needs assets. He might break into a garage. He might take something from a backyard. So if you see something amiss, even if it doesn't look really criminal, report it to the police, because he's moving through that area. He's going to need things to kind of stay on the run if he didn't plan to take those things with him. And so, that's the kind of information that should be put out to the public. Hey, a car was stolen here or whatever, even if, cars are stolen every day. But if a car is stolen overnight in Lisbon, there's more of a concern, a heightened reason to believe that it's him. And so you release that kind of information immediately. And everybody in that area should be staying on the internet, should be watching the news on TV, streaming shows like this, keeping up with the most up-to-date information, because, otherwise, if you're not watching the news, if you're not online following this case, you're not going to know.
What role does social media play in all of this, and how does that make it more difficult for law enforcement that are working to track this guy down and get correct information out there when you have folks who are on social media putting out misinformation or just posting, whatever they see somewhere as fact?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because sometimes you can glean good information off of social media, but oftentimes, like you said, it's a trash can on fire and stuff. And so it really doesn't impact too much. We're able to kind of filter out the white noise. We have teams of analysts that are constantly scanning that stuff, and they're able to kind of sift through it and find out what might be valuable to us and what is, just like you said, just people pontificating and speculating out there and stuff. And so we let that happen. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. That's the public square. That's people talking to each other, and gossiping and stuff. And it really doesn't hurt the investigation, because we don't allow it to kind of influence us at all. We have teams of people that are just trained to kind of sift through that stuff. And if there is a nugget that they feel could be advantageous to the investigation, they can draw that out and send it to who it needs to go to on the investigative team.
What do we know about this now suspect, Robert Card? Because that's something else where a lot of information has come in from various law enforcement agencies. You have other facts coming in from sources, and it kind of gets overwhelming to sort fact from fiction. So what do we know about this guy?
Well, what they've told us is he's an Army reservist. He's a petroleum specialist, which probably means his unit is responsible for getting, fuel to where it needs to go. The Army, particularly when it works in austere environments, it needs to bring its own fuel with it and stuff. And so he's probably somebody that's more of a logistics person. But as a corollary responsibility, he has firearms training. So he's a firearms instructor, which even in the FBI was a kind of a collateral duty. It's something you volunteer for, you get special training, and then you help out with it. And so that's the most troubling part of this. It wasn't his main job in the Army, it didn't seem, but he volunteered probably to have this as a collateral duty, and an additional job of his was firearms instructor, meaning he's very, very familiar with how weapons work, weapons systems, what weapons to use to inflict the maximum amount of casualty and damage. So that's who the person is. And unfortunately, we also know, as they've released, that he's had some challenges in mental health. Look, we all have challenges in mental health. I'm not going to deny that. And people should not be stigmatized before. But in this particular case, we've heard that he's made threats, or he's heard voices, and he's made threats to shoot up his National Guard base or his reserve base. And these voices in his head have been telling him to do things. We know he was committed to a mental health facility just this past summer, which could be just 6, 8, 10 weeks ago. And so those are the things we know that are most troubling, that he was able to still have access to, pretty deadly weapon systems. And with his training, they could be, they were in the wrong hands, clearly, in this situation.
All right, Bobby, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Is there anything you want to add before I let you go?
I think people should be very cautious in those areas, and not only those areas, but adjacent areas, because clearly he's moving. He may have tried to rest overnight in some, remote area, but he's going to be on the move. And so that shelter-in-place location will be changing. And so people really need to stay tuned to the news, stay tuned online to different services, whatever they use to gather their news. People in the entire state and the adjacent states should be on guard until this person's in custody. He's already demonstrated that he's willing to kill people, multiple people. He's very, very dangerous. Don't approach him. And so I would tell people in a very wide area of that area of the country to stay on guard, stay alert, and stay safe as best you can.
All right, Bobby, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. Anytime.
And what you're looking at right now is a live image over Lisbon, Maine. Right here, you can see that is one of the communities where the search efforts are underway for this now suspect that authorities are looking for. We are going to head to a quick commercial break, but on the other side, we will have much more information as we follow this around the clock. We'll be right back with more live, raw, and unfiltered content.
Patients. 8 of those patients were admitted to our hospital. 3 of them.
All right, welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. It looks like there is now another news conference that is underway there in City Hall as this manhunt is continuing. So let me pop up the audio and we'll listen in live, raw, and unfiltered.
The 8 patients who are currently admitted, 5 of those are in stable condition, 3 are in critical condition. We're not going to comment at this time on the gender or the ages of those patients, nor are we going to comment on the nature of those injuries. I'd like to thank also all of the hospitals, healthcare providers, EMS agencies, and air service. From Augusta to Portland, we had incredible support throughout the night and into today. We've had an outpouring of support and offers of assistance, and again, we very much appreciate all of those efforts. Once again, I want to extend our thoughts and prayers to the families, to their loved ones, and to the victims who have been impacted by this tragedy. Thank you very much for your respect for our caregivers and for those families.
Dr. Alexander, can you just describe the range of injuries that your crews treated last night?
Again, we're not going to comment on the nature of the injuries at this time.
Can you say if any of the victims were children under the age of 18?
Again, not going to comment on the ages or the gender of any of the patients at this time.
Can you tell us what kind of preparation and training staff has for these sorts of events?
Sure. Our team, we're a level 3 trauma center. That means that we have in-house at all times trained trauma surgeons, trained anesthesiologists, and an expert emergency department staff. As I mentioned, when the first patient arrived at 7:24, we had approximately 25 team members, physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists who were already available to take care of that patient. By the time the 14th patient came in, approximately 45 minutes later, that number had ballooned to about 50 or 60 care providers. They've gone through extensive training to be prepared for those injuries, and we're very thankful that they were there. They're prepared to help take care of the patients that we received.
Doctor, did all the patients come by ambulance, or were there any who came via private vehicle or walked in?
All of the patients were brought in either by ambulance or by first responders.
Doctor, I know hospitals train all the time for mass casualty events. How did that training prepare you, and did it match the reality?
Again, I think our team did an amazing job. They provided a high level of expertise. We're very thankful that they were able to get as many patients into our trauma bays and into our operating rooms as we were able to. They train regularly, and again, I think it showed.
Doctor, who coordinated whether the patient went to you, went to St. Mary's, or ended up, as I think at least one did get transferred to Fort?
As I mentioned, and as you can tell by the time frame, that situation unfolded very, very quickly. So I would suggest that they came to us based on the experience of the ambulance drivers and the proximity to our facility.
You weren't doing the triage role yourself, for example?
We received the patients as they came to us.
What was the number of people on duty at the hospital last night, and how did that correspond to normal staffing levels?
We had our normal staffing available last night, and as I mentioned when I referenced the ballooning, we had team members, we had approximately 100 team members who were off duty come into the hospital to help ensure that we were able to care for not only the patients that we received from these horrible scene, but also take care of the patients that we had there.
Doctor, from a law enforcement perspective, we're seeing sheriff's deputies and police officers from other jurisdictions come here to help out. Is it similar when it comes to healthcare? Are you seeing doctors and nurses from other towns and areas come lend a hand? And if so, is that something that is helpful and that you'd like to see happen?
Certainly in the short term, there is an outpouring of assistance that's being offered, and you don't know what resources you need or don't need, so it is helpful. We were able to organize those resources and use them effectively. As an example, we had ambulance services from other counties coming on site. At one point, we had approximately 10 ambulance crews standing by outside of our trauma center to ensure that if we had patients who needed to be transferred, they could be transferred. We received nurses and physicians from some of our area hospitals. We had helicopter support, not only from our own Life Flight of Maine, but also from Boston Medflight and from Dartmouth. So the long answer to that, or the short answer is yes.
And then, Doctor, what about the lockdown? Obviously, there was a large police presence outside of the hospital this morning. How long do you anticipate that to be in effect, and why exactly do you need armed personnel outside the hospital at this time?
So we're taking the lead from law enforcement, and they're the ones who are telling us what we need to do and how we need to do it. As long as the city is in, what's the term that they use? Shelter in place. As long as we're in a shelter in place, then we will continue to remain in our current status.
So, this kind of event happens a lot in America. A lot of hospitals like yours have to deal with situations like this. Do you have a professional opinion about the fact that this is part of what the American medical community regularly has to respond to?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have a professional opinion about having to respond to this. I would just say that it's a tragedy, and I think we should do our best to respect the families, those people who have been impacted, the caregivers. I'll just add one thing, just talking about that. We do have an incredible amount of support for people who are going through a difficult time right now, mental health issues, any kind of stress or anxiety from not only the events that have happened, but having to witness some of it. And so we're continuing to provide those resources, and much to the question asked earlier about other areas and other neighboring towns or communities, we've received a lot of support from neighboring towns, communities, and agencies from around the state in order to offer support not only to the patients and families that we have, but also to our team members.
Last question.
Is there a call to action at all for blood drive? I know people want to know if they can help out.
For right now, we and I believe the other trauma centers in the state are very adequately supplied with blood and other supplies. I think the one thing that I would ask for people who are at home right now is if you are in an area where you're being asked to shelter in place, please do so and stay safe.
Can we get back to one point from earlier? Can you, the amount of time that elapsed from when you first got notified, the first patient arrived, till the last one, and obviously some admitted, some not?
Sure. Yeah, that time frame was approximately 45 minutes, and we received 14 patients, critically ill patients at that time, over 45 minutes. So that happened very quickly, and our teams responded exceptionally well.
Thank you all. We'll keep you posted. State Police will have information as soon as they can. I appreciate your patience.
All right, so that was a news conference there with officials that were with the hospital talking about the number of ambulances that did arrive there to the scene. Also saying that 3 of those injured victims are considered critical. They are listed in critical condition. 5 of them are stable as of now. We did learn a short time ago that 18 people are confirmed dead and 13 others wounded as a result of these shootings there in Maine. Let's head to a quick 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back with more live, raw, and unfiltered coverage.
Thank you.